Sure. Hi all. I'm Josie Aarons and I also work at OCDOT here with my colleagues to talk about the MLK paving project, and I work on the paving and sidewalks team, so I can also answer any general questions you have about the paving plan. And yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having us. Looking forward to the discussion.
Randy, would you like to share? All right, anyone who hasn't just shared their name and one thing they'd like to see improved in their neighborhood before we start our agenda?
Yeah, I think my audio is better. Can you hear
Yes.
me? Oh, good. Sorry about that. My name is Emily Ellers. I work for the Department of Transportation as well, along with Josie and Colin. And one thing I'd like to see in my neighborhood are more street trees.
Great. All right, so I'm going to next ask if Deirdre to share any updates from Councilmember Kalb's office. And if anyone has any brief questions or concerns they have for our city council person's office, you can then direct them at myself or Deirdre, mostly Deirdre at the moment. So I'll pass it over to you, Deirdre.
Thank you. So as Colin mentioned, the general plan is happening this Saturday between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m. The city staff would like for residents to be engaged. This is actually going to be an in-person meeting at East Oakland Senior Center, 9255 Eads Avenue. So you can learn about what's going on with the neighborhood plan and provide your vision for Oakland and ideas that you have to stuff. At that time, there will be other events, many coming up in May. I guess I should tell you those because we won't have a meeting until the end of May. But there'll be another, there'll be a housing element workshop on the 12th. And I don't have details about that, but I think that's all going to be made available on the city's website. And then there'll be another general plan open house in West Oakland on the 26th. And beyond that, I don't have anything else to share at this time.
Great, thank you. Anyone have any questions for Deirdre or Councilmember Kalb's office before we go?
I do.
Yeah, my hand is raised too.
Okay. I know last time Dan Cabs was on, he was talking about a homeless encampment on the Martin Luther King by the BART station. Is there any update on that?
On MLK by the BART, which, sorry, which?
BART station, pardon me.
Oh, MacArthur. An encampment?
You were
They
sharing
want to put a
about
homeless encampment there.
No, the community.
Oh, the community cabins,
Yeah.
potential community cabins, sorry. That we're still having conversations with BART about that. I don't really have an update at this time, but we need to figure out what BART has to do in order to move this forward. So once we have line of sight about that, we'll have a better idea about the timeline. And once we have once we know that, then we'll start having community meetings. So I will give you more information as I have that. I would like to add, I did forget about one thing. There's another UCSF Children's Hospital is having another community meeting about Helen McGregor Plaza on May 18th. So if you're interested in that, you can email me and I can get you the Zoom link.
Great, thank you. Kathy?
Yeah, so hi Deirdre. Can you post those meeting dates on the Santa Fe neighborhood page?
Sure, I'll
The
do
one,
that.
the general plan?
Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay, all right. Or if you want me to post them, you can send me the information and I'll be glad to post it.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
you.
Wonderful. So the next thing is I posted the crime stats. You can see the link. Does everyone see that in the chat?
No.
Well, I loaded it to the chat, so it has the crime stats compared from last year, from February 2021 to April 26, 2021, and then the same for 2022. For some, I don't have the ability to share my screen at the moment.
Oh,
But
Let
if
me
someone-
make you host. 1 second.
Max, I don't see anything in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah, sometimes it doesn't appear for people who joined after you might have sent a message.
No problem. I'm gonna just share my screen. Hold on 1 second, and then we'll go into the presentation. Let's see here.
I want to see one thumbs up in the chat.
All right, can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
So I can't answer any questions about the crime stats, but here are the crime stats. So we're not going to spend much time on them. You can either look in the chat forum or take a screenshot. And Officer Gonzalez is our CRO, or at least our beat officer. So you could direct questions to him. Does that work for everyone?
So he's not here today?
No, OPD no longer sends beat officers to NCs unless they're high priority, probably
Oh,
medium
really?
high crime areas. Unless you request them for something very special, then they'll come. So
Okay.
he'll come if there's like many questions that you guys email ahead of time and need to be addressed, but they're not going to come unless there's an issue to address for them.
Oh, okay. Wondering if CPAB knows that. Thank you.
You're welcome. But that might change depending on who's the area sergeant or whatever. But that was the word I got from Joe DeBreeze. So
Like, is that a recent thing? Because I haven't heard of that at all.
I think 6 months ago, I got an email in January. If you email me off the meeting, I can just forward you the email.
Okay, thanks, Max.
Great. So yeah, in the sake of not keeping our presenters waiting, I'm going to pass it over to OCDOT to share about the repaving plan for MLK. So thank you for joining us, and please go ahead. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Over here.
Sorry, I'm having a
While you're doing that, Colin, are you the same person I met in the neighborhood?
Yeah, and Josie and Emily as well.
Yeah. Hi, Colin.
Hey, good to see you again.
Same here.
great. So hand it over to you guys.
Okay. Max, can you make me host again? Or co-host or something? Awesome, thank you. Okay. So again, thank you all, Max and the 10Y residents for having us. I'm here with my name is Colin Peathy. I'm a planner at Oakland Department of Transportation in the Planning and Project Development team. We have my supervisor, Emily Ellers, and Josie Ahrens from the paving team with me to help answer questions. And so tonight, it's mostly just intended to be an introduction and like a high level overview of the questions we're looking at for this project. So this is a paving project, and through Measure KK, we have additional funds to leverage for more substantial infrastructure improvements, such as like pedestrian crossing improvements, transit stop improvements, bicycle improvements, and things like that, and other things to make drivers safe. So we're coming to you all tonight to ask what your high-level feedback is on these like key issue areas so far. We'll in like a few minutes from now, we'll get into collisions and talk about some problem areas, and then we'll talk about next steps after that for the rest of the project. So as many of you know, MLK is a very busy and very fast street. And with the presence of BART tracks on it, it creates a sort of divide in the neighborhood, separating you from like the 11X area and everything to the east. So it's another goal of this paving project is to create a better sense of connection with those features in mind. And then the top goal of this project is to improve safety. So over the past 5 years, we've seen 65 collisions, one of them tragically being fatal. So our main efforts are focused on keeping people alive and uninjured on our streets. As well, now is a time when we're investigating the question of whether or not to implement a protected bike lane on MLK Junior Way. And the paving project is between the Berkeley border, or around 61st Street to 47th Street. So we'll get into some other like variations on this as we get further into it regarding like potential improvements on Genoa and Dover. So existing conditions, as many of you know, are very auto-centric and focused on moving buses and vehicles through the street. The on and off ramp area around 47th Street in particular is pretty challenging to navigate both on foot and on a bicycle.
Yeah.
Right. So one of the things we're considering is what we call a road diet, or reducing one of the lanes of travel to allocate to different uses to narrow the overall width of the street to promote slower driving. So that's one of the ways we're hoping, or that might be feasible for addressing this. We're currently doing technical analysis to see whether or not that is even possible or feasible. It would create too much traffic diversion onto side streets. Excuse me. So like I was mentioning earlier, we've seen 65 collisions and a fatal traffic collision that was on 60th Street. However, most of the collisions tend to be focused towards 52nd Street and 53rd Street. So, excuse me, these are key areas where we're going to implement pedestrian improvements. And like Deidre was mentioning, there's an effort to redesign the Helen McGregor Plaza. So we want to make sure people can get to there, and the hospital, the Children's Benioff Hospital, safely on foot. So some high-level statistics. Most people who get into collisions here tend to be in a vehicle or a pedestrian, which kind of, tracks when you're on the ground. It's with the presence of bikes and peds, it's the street gives you the sense that you should be in a car there, given the level of traffic. So it kind of, so it's sometimes with levels of bicycling and walking, it can be a chicken and egg problem of why you don't see bicyclists and pedestrians, or why you don't see bicycle and pedestrian crashes, simply because the nature of the road can deter those people from being there. oh, excuse me. And then the main contributing factor in collisions tend to be people disobeying traffic signals. So with this project, we're also considering adding a traffic signal at 54th Street, which is a problem we've heard from many of the businesses during our storefront outreach. So just to give you a sense of how wide this street is, I'm sure many of you are intimately familiar with this, but this is what we're working with currently. And we did a first round of outreach starting in March of this year, and about 400 out of 500 people on our survey told us that they would prefer a protected bike lane on the street, as well as receiving a number of comments about improving the pedestrian experience. That was a particularly high priority for folks. So what could happen is that here, I'll go back to the location map for this. So we could potentially put a protected bike lane on the street, which would mean a physically like vertical, a bike lane with vertical protection on the side. But if we find out that this isn't feasible from like a technical point, from our traffic analysis, or that the community doesn't want it, or if it's financially infeasible in some way at the moment, then we could pursue alternative routes, on Genoa or Dover Street, which Genoa is currently a neighborhood bike route, and we're planning to do the same treatment on Dover. So then there's also questions of how to route people at 47th Street. We could potentially put them onto West and then send them up onto MLK or Genoa or Dover. So we have a handful of questions awaiting us, and then we'll be getting into more of that during our second round of outreach. So I'll put my email and the project website in the chat. And our next steps are to complete the technical analysis to see whether or not a road dye is feasible, and to do the second round to help us have the community help us decide between what kind of improvements they want to see. So with that, thank you so much for having us, and we're happy to take any questions.
Hi, Colin. It's
Hey.
Kathy.
Hey there.
So you showed an earlier drawing showing 5 lanes on MLK. Yeah, this one. So, there's a turn lane for both, which would add another lane. Like the one
Right.
on the right side doesn't have a turn lane there. I guess is that what the street that's heading towards Berkeley?
Yeah, so I did this section on the north end of 55th. So yeah, definitely that should include another turn lane, but this is like when you get to the north end of the intersection. So there's not a right or a left turn lane there.
Oh, okay. All righty.
But good observation though. Thank you.
Sure. So you said the city is considering putting a signal light on 54th. So you're gonna have one at 52nd, 53rd, 54th, and 55th. So
It's a
that means,
consideration.
right, so that means that people are gonna be speeding. I live on 58th. So then that'll mean people will start speeding. They're already speeding. Once they get past 53rd, they're speeding to 59th. And then after 59th, when they cross that stop sign, they're speeding to the Berkeley side, and in both directions. So that means that the people that are between 55th and 59th are still going to be faced with being unable to cross the street. Now, we have 3 senior citizen buildings on MLK between 58th and 61st. And so the senior citizen building is actually on 58th. So for the 58th Street people, they like to cross at 58th instead of going backwards to 59th Street. So just, wondering about treatment on the other streets. I mean, I don't know what we can do. Maybe we can put on those streets some of those pedestrian signs. Like I did a whole schematic on where we could have those push button pedestrian lights, which would give priority to pedestrians versus vehicles.
Mhm.
So that's some fixes I think that would help. Because as it stands now, if you cross that first lane or you get in the middle lane, then people won't stop in the other lanes. So you're technically out in the middle of traffic with cars rushing by you in the curb lane and next to the median lane, and you're stuck. And this has been going on for, I mean, I can't even tell you how long it's been going on. So we're still going to have that problem unless we get some pedestrian lights there to sort of aid us. Now we're having a lot of young people that are moving into the neighborhood. They've got kids, and that's particularly scary for it's scary for me, but it's particularly scary for people out there who are pushing baby carts to get trapped in the middle of this street on both sides, and cars refuse to stop. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kathy. We definitely hear you on those issues. That in the median lane you were talking are you talking about the east-west movements across MLK?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we definitely heard that from the businesses as well, and them wanting some more like turn markings or other kinds of features to help those cross movements. So yeah, it's definitely on our radar.
Yeah, and it gets really ugly. I mean, sometimes when you're trying to cross the street in the neighborhood you've lived in practically your whole life, people start giving you the finger or cussing you out. And it's like, excuse me, I live here, you don't.
Yeah.
So, it's like, stressful, very stressful for us to cross that street.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Thank you. Anyone else?
Collins, you mentioned a bicycle barrier. What type of barrier would that be for bicycles?
So we haven't really settled on the design, like specific design, since we're still seeing like if it's even feasible at all from the traffic study. But it would typically be something like we're building on Telegraph Avenue right now with the concrete islands as a barrier.
Concrete?
Mm-hmm. If we get grant funding, if it turns out this is feasible and desired by the community, and we get grant funding, then we could potentially do something like planters or things like that. But we haven't gotten that far, and we're not close to that decision right now.
Okay.
Would that potentially include like bulb outs at the intersections?
Yes, we definitely are going to look into something like that at 52nd and 53rd, and potentially a mid-block crossing before 47th to connect to the hospital parking lot that's across the street.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. One more thing to mention regarding timing. This project for construction is about 2 years out. That's the estimate we give it for most kinds of paving projects, like when we're in the planning process now, and then looking out through to completion.
So if repaving takes that long, the pedestrian fixes shouldn't take that long. With respect to having the pedestrian push lights, how soon could we get those implemented?
Right, so we still have to look at the traffic analysis. The traffic analysis to see what retiming would do to the street. Since there's so many vehicles, retiming could potentially create backups or diversion. And that's something we want to look at before doing that, although it is a priority. So I think I could let Emily speak to prioritization, but in general, we need to like understand the effects beforehand.
Okay.
But that being said, though, feel free to submit a 311 request, or to our capital improvement program, we accept submissions from the public. So if we see momentum for this that could help push for it to be built earlier, then that's another way to get things built.
Oh, great. Okay, thank you. So like a petition or something from the neighborhood.
Yeah, I'll put the link in the chat to the 311 page.
We've been pretty successful with those.
Have you talked to the businesses on that street to see what the impact would be on them?
We have, there's some concerns about on-street parking and general like access for patrons, but if we were to do a road diet or to take away a lane for a bike lane, we'd still be able to maintain parking. So we're also looking at adding an angled in parking on 55th to increase any parking that we might take away for like improving visibility at intersections.
Mhm.
You're not talking about putting smart meters on that street, are you?
I don't think we haven't had that conversation yet. Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Colin, it's Tristan. We've talked multiple times about this. You're talking about angled parking on 55th, which would interfere with the bike lane on there. But what about doing angled parking on MLK as part of the road diet?
That's something we're still looking at. Again, we're waiting on the traffic analysis to see
Okay.
how much space we can take up.
And in regards to a bike lane, you talked about the transition at 47th at where the freeway entrance is. And we talked about this a little bit, having the bike lane in the center that then went under the BART tracks, which would also handle the whole transition at 47th and the freeway entrance, and not having the bike lane and the freeway entrance interfering with each other and causing mass confusion of people trying to get on the freeway and having bicyclists in their lane, that they're just people trying to cross each other's lanes in what would be very natural ways for the way the traffic flows there. Whereas if it was in the center, you took away space in the center to have a bike lane, those bikes could transition onto underneath the BART tracks and through that length of MLK pretty easily.
Yeah, that's I remember talking about this with you earlier.
I know there are concerns, but I mean, I'm not expecting a full answer from you right now. Just point out once again that there's ways to put both in ways that they're not crossing with each other as much. And that's where in my experience, the separated bike lanes have the biggest issue. Is you have too many points where people get to intersections and drivers and cars have not seen each other, or drivers and bikes have not seen each other until the intersection. And then a pedestrian is trying to cross the street and you have three people and nobody's quite sure who's supposed to go and who's in whose lane. And everybody gets confused, everybody gets freaked out. Everything becomes people having to move rapidly and accelerate or decelerate rapidly to avoid injury.
Right. Yeah. I think the one, like you mentioned, like reducing conflict points is pretty key. And the center running bike lane is a difficult type of project to implement because of the coordination with BART, whether or not they would even allow such a thing on their right of way, and then introducing like new signals for bikes at each of the intersections. We can look into that. It may or may not take this project out of its original scope. But to your point about trying alternatives, though, we are looking at Dover and Genoa, like improving those alternative routes. So we're trying to look at other options besides just a protected bike lane. MLK.
I'll unraise my hand.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I live between Genoa and Martin Luther King, and Genoa is already a bike, I guess, shared bike street with vehicles. And the problem with that street is people going east and west don't stop at the stop signs. So when you're on your bicycle, you have to stop at every street. It's not just, King Street is so much better because people stop. That's where Genoa ends and the bike boulevard begins in Berkeley on King Street. It's just so much easier, but people refuse to stop, and there's been so many near misses. I don't know if there's been any accidents, but I know it's near misses on Genoa Street. So that's the problem with that street.
Yeah, we're hearing of similar stuff on Dover too, from the hospital, like Dover and 53rd, where people just kind of speed through that intersection, even though it's like, it seems like a low stress, like neighborhood street. So if it turns out we end up going forward with the neighborhood bike route approach, then that's something we're definitely going to look at, like potentially like a diversion for traffic at that intersection to prevent like fast movements or to slow down vehicles. So yeah, it's unfortunate to hear it happening on Genoa too. So
Yeah.
that's something we'll definitely be looking at.
Yeah, that street was so dangerous. That's why it's a four-way at Arlington and Genoa, because a number of people have been killed at that intersection, and people who have been living on Arlington for a long time fought the city and got that four-way there. But that took a long time. So that was the only one that was really fixed in terms of, pedestrian safety, but the rest of, and I think 59th Street, but the rest of Genoa is just, wild, wild west. If you're on a bicycle, or even if you're in a car, it's the same thing. If people aren't stopping, if they're going east to west, I mean, you won't get as severely injured in a car, of course, but it's, it's still somebody being hurt and still an accident.
Right. And then again, to those points too, we have other paving projects coming up on 52nd and 59th. And those streets are planned to be neighborhood bike routes in our bike plan. So we're hoping to implement some more like traffic calming and safety improvements there.
You know what? I saw that part, now that you bring up 59, 59 dead ends at Market Street. So if that's a bike boulevard, you can only make a right turn. You can't make a left turn. So you would still not, you would have to turn, you'd have to get over on 58th Street or either go to Stanford. It would be roundabout.
Right.
You can't go straight through. Just in case you didn't know that.
Right. Thanks for that. Yeah, it's kind of an awkward jog over that Stanford Adeline Market area.
Right.
Yeah, just yet another one of the things we're trying to figure out with the potential side street routing.
Right. Okay.
One other point on the side streets that I've heard from a couple of neighbors recently. I don't know if it's not within your purview directly, but I don't know if anybody in the city, some of the mapping apps, specifically Waze, from what I've heard from a couple people, direct people down the side streets. And it means that people who live on residential streets have a lot more traffic on their street than they really should. And I know folks are looking for help figuring out how to talk to these companies and be like, no, that's not an appropriate. How do you get, if you're going to have people go between MLK and Market, they should be using 55th. They shouldn't be using Arlington or 57th and going down the side street through the Waze app or the Google Maps app that's sending you. So
Oh my God, were you reading my mind?
I was talking about it with someone a day and a half ago, Kathy. So, yeah, it's just, I know that, I don't know, like, you put somewhere in the world of the city if somebody from the city can help reach out to those companies, I'm sure the neighborhood would really appreciate it.
We would really appreciate it on 58. So, I have family on Arlington and and, you know, neighbors that are friends, and we're on 58th, and the amount of traffic that has been diverted by Google and Waze is unbelievable on our street. And we have speed bumps on our street. And so the commuters that are coming through don't know that. And so all day long, and particularly during commute hours, they're speeding over those speed bumps, and all we hear is boom, boom, boom. It's like, what is going on here? And so they're tearing up our street. They're tearing up the speed bump. Our street used to be so quiet, and now it's really bad.
Mhm. Yeah, and-
Also on 45th Street between Martin Luther King and Adeline, they use 45th Street as a freeway. They
Mm.
got huge beer trucks, freight trucks,
Yeah.
construction trucks using, and like Kathy said, the bumps, they just go right over that. And we have so many potholes on 45th Street
Mm.
because they're using our street as a freeway. And one of my other concerns is I live on 45th. So when I'm getting ready to get on the freeway, either going to 580, you make a left-hand turn off for 45th onto Martin Luther King, and there's an on-ramp right there
Mhm.
to get on. So I was waiting there about 2 months ago for the traffic because it was speeding, getting on the freeway.
Mhm.
And the person behind me was so impatient, he wanted me to go and cut in front of these cars. Well, what he
Yeah.
did, he came on the side, on the passenger side, broke my window off, my mirror window off, because I wouldn't move.
Oh.
Because that traffic was, it was speeding and I couldn't move. And there were like 2 other cars behind me, but I couldn't go anywhere. So
Mhm.
that's a problem right there, getting on that on-ramp right there to get on the freeway. When you
Yeah,
gotta
I'm
hit-
so sorry. Sorry, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry to hear that. Like, no one should have their property
Well,
damaged
he
just
did it on
because of like
purpose.
traffic frustration.
Yeah, he did it on purpose. He knocked my mirror off. And then the guy behind me, I guess apparently he didn't see me, and he ran into the back of my car while I was sitting there. So I had a double
Mm.
injury right there within 5 minutes. But I'm just saying that traffic is moving so fast to get on that freeway, and I have to stop. I can't go anywhere. So that's another danger right there, getting on that freeway. And when they don't cut down the grass level, you can't see what's coming,
Mhm.
from Martin Luther King to get on that freeway. So they definitely need to keep that visitation down low.
Thanks so much for that, Alberta. That's something we definitely didn't anticipate with like Caltrans area and their
Oh, yeah.
like their
Definitely.
vegetation. But
Yeah.
yeah, and thanks for sharing. This is really helpful to hear. So on that stretch of MLK between 40th and 47th, would you say like you say there's like speeding issues and other
Yeah.
things like that on that stretch?
Yeah, because when you making, like I said, making that left-hand turn on 45th on Martin Luther King, and then that's that turn to get on the freeway, that traffic is moving. If that light doesn't stop them, they're doing like, I'd say 60 to 70 miles to get on, to get on the freeway, either go to San Francisco or go to get on 880. So it's really bad.
Yeah, that was poorly designed because the grade is so steep
It
that
is.
you can't get a running start.
You
if
sure
cars
can.
are- Yeah, it's poorly designed.
Yeah, especially when the vegetation is up tall, you can't see those cars coming. So they really need to keep that down. Yeah,
So Josie just put in the chat that we got 45th and MLK on our paving plan tentatively for 2024.
yeah. Because they use it from Telegraph all the way down to Adeline. Huge trucks. They shouldn't be down our street at all.
Mhm. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. It's
You're welcome.
really helpful to hear because we're considering a road diet as well on the stretch between 40th and 47th. So it might look similar to how it looks south of 40th Street. It's like 2 lanes and a center turn lane.
Hi, this is Glenn. I can't figure out how to do the hand raising symbol, but I do want to add some comments.
Mhm.
So I'm on 55th between MLK and Market. And, it's an interesting kind of no man's land where the worst behaviors, traffic behaviors on MLK spill over. And it's interesting with most of actually all of the striping on 55th is not visible, no longer visible. And as I'm sure you know, it's super wide. So what you see is people coming off of MLK onto this wide open, something that feels wide open with no visual cues to manage the traffic. And it's, you can sit in your house and you hear people hit the gas and you get a lot of cars moving probably in the 50-mile-an-hour range. You will occasionally see people passing each other. Visually it's not much narrower than, sort of the 3 lanes of MLK that there's traffic. And it feels very dangerous. Obviously the noise isn't great. There are potholes that people who travel it regularly know to avoid. And so what they do is they swing around them and into the bike lane, because the bike lane is the lines separating it are no longer there. So there's, I know that the paving is 2 years away, but all of the visual cues that should be there to manage traffic flow and speed and behavior are gone. And so something like restriping would be pretty powerful, I think, if it were ever possible in advance of actually, more infrastructural changes. So I just wanted to sort of throw that in there. Just some other observations from my own experience driving with 55th and MLK. When you're on 55th and you're sort of stopped at the light waiting to cross, the lights on 55th are on the median, but there are no traffic lights on the far side of the intersections. So often like your A-pillars will block the lights, like it's hard to figure out what's turned. And all the other roads, we're all trained to look at the far end of the intersection for the lights. And so I wonder if that creates confusion for some drivers, not only about, is there a light at all, but, if you're at the front and you don't go, because you can't see and people behind you get irritated and impatient and frustration. So there's a real, I know how it works and I still sit there and I'm like, I have to move my head to see. So I think that might create confusion and frustration for drivers. So that's sort of me dumping sort of all the things on my mind. The only other thing I'd just quickly go back, I heard you mention the consideration of angle parking on 55th. And I don't know enough about angle parking to kind of have an opinion about that, but their comment was made that it would likely eliminate the bike lane. And I would support them keeping a bike lane on 55th.
Yeah, thanks so much, Glenn. Yeah, to hit on the first part of your comments, I use 55th a lot as well, and have experienced people passing others, and yeah, the striping is basically gone. So I definitely hear you on that. And yeah, that's a good point about the big cars and the blocking traffic lights. It's something I definitely hadn't considered. And then angled parking, we can still fit that. I looked at the measurements of the street, and we could still fit that in and keep a bike lane. We may have to shift like the center lane and narrow the drive lanes, but it's definitely possible.
Just curious what the, I guess, concern or issue being addressed by angle parking. And to be honest, if there was a bike lane and angle parking, it would make it really hard for people to drive 50 miles an hour. So now I feel like that might be something pretty great. But I think I thought that having some width on 55th mattered for things like fire trucks and whatnot. So I'm just kind of, for the angle parking, like that actually sounds like it might align with an interest I have. But I'm curious what's driving the consideration of it.
The consideration is from feedback we've heard from businesses on close to 55th Street. We're potentially taking away some parking, like right at intersections, to improve visibility. So
got it.
That would help with like adding more parking than there is currently.
Okay, so
Yeah, go ahead.
no, that's helpful.
Totally. Yeah, and then it wouldn't be on both sides. It would probably be on the north side of 55th. Yeah, east of 55th.
So I'm trying to think what businesses you're talking about. Ace Hardware?
Correct. Ace
Okay.
Hardware, Earthly Coffee, and several of the businesses
What about
north and
church?
south.
Earthly
from them.
Coffee doesn't have any parking because there's the 12 bus stops right there.
That's right.
So they don't have any parking at all unless it's further up the street or around the corner on 55th.
Yeah, so that's been an issue we've heard from them and from Tristan on the call. So we're trying to help them out with more parking where we can.
Alrighty. Yeah, I
What
know
about-
Tristan.
That's on the corner.
Excuse me?
There's a church right next adjacent to Ace Hardware store. There's a church right there. And they
Right,
have a
They have their own parking.
well, they have a parking lot, but it's not large enough though.
On
Oh, does it get
Sundays,
full up?
most of the other businesses around there are closed. So they have no problem taking up the entire streets, taking up the
Exactly.
driveways of the, of the body shop. They're fine. King's Market. I mean, Mrs. King, God bless her. I talked with her about this years ago, and how the lack of parking on MLK that people could easily get in and out of their cars changed the flow of her business from being people shopping for any sort of groceries and reduced to people walking by for like, I'll come grab a 6-pack and I'll come grab a bag of chips. And she was no longer able to really sell the more grocery items and the folks she used to get from the senior center who would come, or the senior living who would come on down and get like a week's worth of groceries from her. So, and the new owner, I have no idea, like he's 3 generations past Mrs. King in terms of owners of that business to be able to really talk about what the business used to sell. So, and I know that the parking is an issue for him in terms of what people buy when they come in. And so what sort of product he carries.
Colin, are you gonna have cameras on the poles?
What kind of cameras are you referring to?
Cameras when people don't stop or they're driving in a bicycle lane.
Oh, like
Like-
red light cameras? That's a good question.
Yeah, because I don't believe anybody's getting a ticket for running red lights or stop signs anymore.
mhm.
They just go right through. The camera's sitting up there, but have you guys checked to see how many people have run the stop sign or the red lights?
Yeah, so we currently have a Safe Oakland Streets initiative underway to look at automated enforcement citywide. So I think we're still kind of planning for what policy direction we're going to take on red light and speed cameras. I think we just had legislation, or Emily and Josie, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we have legislation for speeding cameras as well. Maybe Oakland would be one of the candidates.
Yeah, there's a piece of statewide legislation that is making its way through the life cycles of bills in Sacramento, but it would allow cities, including Oakland, to run a automated speed enforcement pilot. So it's been many years. I think this is maybe the 5th time something like this has tried to go through the California legislature. The cameras you currently see in intersections across Oakland are to help with sort of signal cycles. So it'll trip the signal to indicate that a vehicle is waiting. So the cameras we have right now are not doing enforcement. They're for signal
Okay,
timing.
they're not for enforcement. Okay, not enforcement. Okay.
Right.
Oh,
Thanks,
so they're
Josie.
triggered. So they have something that's triggered for vehicles, but not for pedestrians?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's bananas.
Yes.
It's a legacy system we're working within about who gets priority on
Exactly.
roads.
Yes.
So hoping to, because people of all types using all modes are using our streets. And so, we're working to increase our investment in places where we know people are walking and biking and taking transit as well as driving. I mean, on MLK, like what Colin shared is, the street isn't really working well for anyone who uses it, including people driving. I mean, the majority of crashes we see are between vehicles. And so we need to make improvements as well for people driving, because it's not working well. It's dangerous, especially for people walking and biking, but also for people driving.
Yeah, the only reason you don't have more pedestrian fatalities and injuries on MLK is because we just sit there, we just stand there and wait. Everybody is just scared to cross that street. That's the only reason.
Yeah, because I stop in the medium. I don't, even when it says 17 minutes, 17 seconds, whatever, I just stop right there because I know they're gonna go right past me. So I stop and let them go. It's dangerous over by Children's Hospital.
Yeah, the signal timing is an issue we're looking at with our traffic study. We've heard this so many times, and we really want to make sure that people can feel comfortable crossing the street. So we're hoping to get clarity on what effects that would have to lengthen the signal time, like up and down before doing that.
Because when you cross that street by the hospital, when the guys get ready to make a left-hand turn, if you're walking, you pass the middle of the street, he's gonna go in front of you and still make that left-hand turn. He's not gonna wait till you walk across that street. He's just gonna go right in front of you or go in back of you. They're impatient. A lot of people are impatient now. I guess because of the pandemic. And another thing too is, I almost was hit again on Seminary. They're driving in the bicycle lane. By Mills College, where it merges into one lane, there's a bicycle lane right there. And he stayed on my tail on the right-hand side bumper so he could pass me, but I couldn't go anywhere because the other lane was oncoming traffic, but he stayed on my bumper, but he drove in the bicycle lane. So that's dangerous. Really
I'm really sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
All right, well, I wanted to keep us to the time of the meeting, so I wanted to thank our guest presenters for the lively discussion with lots of community participation. Did you guys want to put any info in the chat in case people want to follow up with questions?
Yeah, I put my email and then the link to the 3-on-1 system in there, and I'll put in our paving project. 1 second. But yeah, thank you so much for having us.
Yes, great. And I want to thank everyone for attending, and thank you to Deirdre from Dan Kalb's office for attending the meeting. So we'll be meeting the 4th Wednesday of May. And yeah, we now have a Facebook page. Please like the Facebook page and get on the email list if you're not on it. And yeah, thanks so much. I'll see everyone next month.
Great, thanks so much, Max.
Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate all your work on this project, and we look forward to working with you more on MLK.
Definitely, sounds good.
Likewise.
Thanks,
Take care.
Max.
Right. Peace,
Bye.
everyone.
Good night.
Bye, everyone.